Quantum technology is moving fast, but building real impact takes more than breakthroughs. It takes the right people, the right strategy, and the right ecosystem. Welcome to Beyond the Bit Quantum Pathways. I'm Amir Rasool. Each episode I speak with founders, researchers, and operators, shaping how quantum is built, commercialized, and scaled in the real world. And if you're building teams in quantum, QAI Talent tackles this exact challenge. Today I'm joined by Sierra Clouse, co-founder of Barclow, a venture studio focused on deep tech, advanced compute and commercializing emerging technologies. Sierra's path is a really interesting one. She's worked across Microsoft, Xbox, startups, cybersecurity, blockchain, and now quantum adjacent venture building. So this conversation isn't just about quantum in the abstract, it's about how research actually becomes a roadmap, how that roadmap becomes revenue, and what kind of people, skills, and operating models are needed to make that happen. We talk about the gap between research, capital, and talent, why early-stage deep tech companies need to think much harder about their first hires, the role of fractional and contract expertise, and why workforce policy needs to move beyond generic skill pipelines. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi, Sierra. Great to see you again.
Hi, likewise.
For people who haven't met you, how would you describe what you do at Barclow in a sentence or two?
Yeah, so at Barclow, we're what's called a venture studio where we both build and back companies. What we tell folks is as we focus on deep tech and more critical applications of advanced compute, advanced intelligence, et cetera, we can remember it really shorthand as research, roadmap, revenue. So we focus on commercialization. That's a big word. But in practice, that means science is never settled. There's always going to be a bunch of research out there. But a lot of that research, particularly when we think about quantum technologies and a lot of these next-gen solutions, we can engineer from that baseline of science into roadmaps and products. And we can do that in a demand-led way because we know there's a lot of supply chain, reshoring, nearshoring, onshoring sort of capacity we need to be able to develop our own products and goods and services. And then once we engineer with that kind of lens, that kind of practicality and product focus, ideally that leads to a path to traction and revenue and profitability. So that's our approach and what we've been focused on the last few years.
Oh, brilliant. And prior to that, you were at Microsoft and Xbox, weren't you? So what kind of things were you doing there?
So I relocated to join Microsoft about 7 years ago. I was working in a group at the time of verticals called customer success. So Microsoft has different field teams and account teams that serve their customers all over the world. And I was part of a division that focused on more the usage, really making sure that after the customer signed their contract and renewed their licenses, they were getting the value and utility out of the tools that they got as part of what they signed up for. And so I was doing that across modern work and security. So things around 365, Sentinel, that sort of thing, primarily working with enterprises here in the Pacific Northwest. All names that your audience and folks here would probably know that our team covered. So I started off in the field, and one of the things that we were accountable to is a scorecard target across our different workloads, to really making sure that the customers we were accountable to serving were really seeing steady growth, getting the most usage out of the tools that they signed up for. And so there was a transition period, though, pretty quickly, because I moved here in fall of 2019. And what I had noticed was that there were some tools within 365 that my customers I was assigned just weren't interested in. And so I was kind of finding more automated workflow-based solutions that they might be interested in trying. And that's when I got a call saying that, hey, that workflow automation stuff you've been talking to customers about, that's actually something globally Microsoft was looking to put on the scorecard and start driving usage around. So I shifted from the field to a global team where I was advising the playbooks and go-to-market sort of motions, resources, and an internal tracking and reporting to help our teams all over the world drive results with those automations. And then I saw the opportunity to go to Xbox. I actually had a chance to be a part of the chief of staff office with CEO of Xbox, with Phil Spencer and that amazing team of executive leadership. And I was there during the Activision Blizzard King sort of integration conversations, but I got to just be a part of really unique time for Xbox. A lot of stuff is out there now about what they've transitioned into recently. But at the time, I mean, their leadership team still hadn't had like a in-person offsite. since the pandemic when I joined them in 2021. So I was able to work with a team and help organize that and really learn from literally the best in the business on so many elements of what it takes to run an organization like that that's run on consumer demand, hardware, a lot of tech involved, but people are really there for the narrative. They're there for the stories. They're there for Game Pass. And it was really special to work for a brand like that in tech, because I will say that working in like workplace tools and productivity and then going to Xbox, you get a real appreciation for when you're working on a tool or a solution that's kind of tolerated at work versus
Yeah.
something that's really like beloved and celebrated.
Yeah.
And so that one of the ways people talked about it was there was a part of the business where people couldn't wait to log off so they could log into Game Pass and get into the other part of the business. So it's they really lived up to the name, the joy of gaming that way. That was a great experience.
That's quite big tech and quite some pretty big roles there. Long and the short of it, why did you leave? What pushed you from big tech into moving into co-founding Barclow Venture Studio?
So when I transitioned from Xbox, I had an opportunity to join a Series B, a startup that had spun out of Meta. Mark Zuckerberg and the Meta team had really wanted to focus on the metaverse and at one point wanted them to have their own cryptocurrency. And so the strategic direction was to focus purely on metaverse and kind of leave the crypto stuff out of it. But the teams had already at that point developed a new programming language and all of that good stuff. So I was with one of the teams that spun out of that. And so I got to do a startup growth, ecosystem, grants, and partnerships with a brand new programming language. It's called Move, if anybody wants to look it up. I was really interested because it's an object-oriented blockchain language. And from a gaming use case perspective, you kind of want that object-oriented part of the blockchain because that's what allows things to have recognition for its processing transactions, lower the cost, increase the speed, all of that. But then as I was starting to work with developer relations and some of the stuff around tooling, I got to go all over the world to do these sorts of activations and builder houses. I started learning more about cryptography proper. And, obviously what would differentiate a programming language like this, and how people were building different solutions and, the kind of various amounts of success that building teams were having with it. And then with that came a lot of folks who were really passionate, and I was too, still am, around privacy, around using cryptography and blockchain actually as like an infrastructure modality versus just the cryptocurrency financial part of it. And so I was doing that. And then I had been working with a cybersecurity firm. But part of the reason, I guess, like to launch Barclow coming out of that, so big tech into startups and cybersecurity, was because there was just this very real recognition that incumbency can really get in the way of innovation, which is understandable, right? You can't really disrupt yourself
Mm-hmm.
in a way that is it will really kind of undermine the expectations of your shareholders, your investors, and all of that. And when you have an organization with so much size and scale and complexity, when you do have what we call like this post GPT moment, your ability to run lean and mean with the tools out there, it assumes you're starting from zero, but you're not. There's a whole lot that you have to change and evaluate, et cetera. But what I found pretty quickly within startups, and then cybersecurity, and now like within Barclow, there's just so many tools, so much data. I heard one person say recently, if we had to do our fund or data centers or they just listed a bunch of examples, and we could do it now instead of like even just like 5 or 6 years ago, he's like, we would do it differently. We just would,
Mm-hmm.
because now we have to play the ball as it lies. But if we were starting like net new clean slate,
Yeah.
and so that's what the opportunity at Barclow provided me, and then I was able to do that as a follow up to the time I had been in startups.
So I suppose what was the mission statement for Barclow, and how did that get off the ground?
Yeah, I shared with you like our North Star research roadmap revenue.
Mm-hmm.
That's that kind of commercialization and the way that might evolve across what we call deep tech over the years. That stays the North Star. We landed on that because Johnny and I are operators. So our venture studio, we were like, who's there? It's Johnny and I, our tool stack in a trench coat, somewhat, but we're very much that AI sort of native thing that you hear people talk about of like, you're going to be able to do so much with just the right tools, the right partnerships, that kind of thing. And so that's what we've been doing. So we came to that for a few reasons. One, we notice as operators that investors, there's a bit of an innovation paradox. There's several of them, but when it particularly comes to seeking investment in capital for deep tech innovation, what investors want to see and what will get product customer traction, those aren't always really clear and aligned at the beginning. Particularly when you talk about, what mentioned like science and research being like the basis of how we get these products. You're talking about academics and scientists and patent holders having to navigate pitch competitions, having to navigate some of these more commercial dynamics and do it with a team, having to find a team, having to find talent. So what we found was that when you think about just trying to get things from patent to product and product to profit, there are these sort of operational like levers that if you're purely in venture, because you're a bit more hands off and you're doing this from an analysis perspective, you don't get to really work with those levers the way you can with the venture studio. The other thing that we recognized as well was there's a lot of incubator and accelerator programs out there across the board where you don't leave with a prototype, you don't leave with a product, you don't leave with a pipeline to even convert and pursue. That to us is still weird. So that is something that we saw as something that's an immediate kind of value and differentiator. And then the last thing I'll say is that when we like here in the US, so we're focused Barclow right now. We're based in Seattle. We work with hubs and contacts all over the world. But in terms of being in pre-formation for our first fund and getting all this set up, we were really looking at how, so our region doesn't have a quantum technology hub, doesn't have like a state initiative, et cetera. There's about 40 plus countries around the world that do have it formalized and funded. And then there's about, I think, between 12 and 14 hubs here in the US. And so what we kept hearing was from the administration level in the US and regionally, et cetera, was this whole thing of, well, we're looking to the private sector to help us commercialize these technologies and have American and trade partner friendly solutions and deep tech, et cetera. And it was almost like the private sector didn't get the memo.
Yeah.
Right. But that said, when we talk to different folks across private public partnerships, investors, talk about like to family offices, et cetera, there's some very real energy around, you know what, if we're going to do it private sector, like let's figure out how to use existing resources and tools that are already out there across these hubs, and then give the private sector direct upside to monetizing these products. And let's do it more, we kind of do it more in a private equity way, where when private equity gets a hold of something, it's the same thing with some startup acquisitions, right? It can start off a whole company and it turns out to be just a handful of features or products that sell and sell well. And so our thought was, well, why don't we just build that way from the beginning? Not everything needs to be a company. There's lots of really great products. There's lots of really great IP. There's nothing wrong with being an order taker and being demand led and building things that we know are needed, and then seeing where it goes from there. So we have these different commercial pathways. So those are the main things that we've really been looking at. And the last year and the speed of the industry and some of the hyperscalers in quantum technology have really proven that that's really a smart move, because it also helps, if nothing else, your kind of product track, the teams you're working with, et cetera, be eligible and qualified to be a part of a hyperscaler ecosystem, in the same way that Microsoft or AWS has cloud partners or system integration partners. We're in a really great position where, if nothing else, the upside of what we build and back can plug into those.
And I suppose why quantum?
Well, great question. So when I was when Johnny had approached me, so I had met Johnny in my blockchain days several years ago, because he was doing he had an IoT exit, but he was working with a firm that was doing a lot of these like go to market sort of more on the creative side around different brands using these advanced technologies. And it wasn't necessarily just quantum. It was really more so that we had a recognition that going from like 2024. So he had approached me with this at the end of 2024. And when I was working with the cybersecurity boutique firm, they were primarily working on state, local, and other government sort of contracts was their focus. And I had a feeling that the political winds were going to change, even for cybersecurity contracts to get that covered. And so when Johnny had approached me with this, and we kind of saw just how close and just the roadmap development of what was happening in quantum technology, at least for me on the security side, it became very clear that even if we did nothing but security, because I was just learning about quantum, I'm always learning about it, but even back then, it's like, if we did nothing but security and that kind of readiness around quantum technologies and AI and all of that, that could be the entire studio.
For sure. Yeah.
Truly, because we think about it as like these next gen sort of solutions where you have to play offense and defense. So the offense is what things become faster, cheaper, better, or newly possible for your business or operation or organization. But the defense side is looking at these threat cases. And so the thing that really got me the most interested around quantum was kind of this forcing function to have to look at crypto agility and to have to look at assets and have to look at infrastructure and actually have a plan. And while you're at it, why don't we take the whole sort of like threat management and security operations next gen? Because you have these net new threats from various types of AI. You have these threats around cryptography, these risks around cryptography. So that's really what it more so was for me. When it comes to commercialization, from a thesis and focus perspective, we definitely follow our North Star and stick to that. But when we think about products, most people, they don't even know how to find their IP address, and they like are arguing with strangers on the internet in comment sections, right? Like when we do a good job or too good a job of product, people do not have to be an expert to use and benefit from it. Cars are a similar way, where you don't have to know how to fix a transmission to put gas in your tank and to drive your car around. And so that's really kind of what we're thinking about, is if we're doing a really good job, especially for what we think is kind of some broader adoption sort of needs and products, people don't necessarily need to know it's quantum or it's spatial or it's edge. I think about the mobile phone. If we were stuck on our labels, what would this be? It's edge compute, it's telecom, it's a network device, it's a gaming device, it has haptic feedback, right? Like, so we try to really keep that level of pragmatism when it comes to what we prioritize and follow that demand.
Yeah, and interestingly, the consumer doesn't really care how it does what it does, as long as it does what it needs to do.
That's right. Yep. That's really what we're hearing, is that pragmatic piece, and people are interested. Of course, subset of folks are very interested in quantum technologies and how they work, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of that kind of gets you more into papers, right? It kind of gets you more into research papers and programs. And when you think about the call to action to the everyday person, what we're finding is we do a lot of events and activations. Our education series is called the Quantum Curio, and that's been really valuable to connect with ecosystem partners and all of that. But it's also been valuable because what we keep hearing from people is, I look up a paper, or I hear about a breakthrough, or I see a news headline, and then what? What does somebody like me do? Like if I wanted to do something around my skills or my career, if I wanted to do something around investing, there's really no clear call to action when people are primarily getting educated through like the news cycle or even like sales cycles and pitch decks. It's been really great to offer folks some hands-on sort of resources and tools and awareness that we're finding is starting to elevate and expand the conversation beyond qubits and that sort of really more technical considerations.
Okay. So obviously when you created Barclow, was there a specific gap? Either was it research, capital, talent that you were trying to close?
Yeah, it was really how you apply all of, because so there's research, capital, and talent. But if the research just stays research, the capital goes to more research and the talent goes to more research. So that's really what we're trying to address, is kind of like the challenge of like games and prizes. So if you're going to go after research, that's what you're going to get more of. But if you're going to go after commercialization, especially with these new sorts of like risk and considerations, but also these new sorts of tools to try and discover more things faster, that's really the gap that we wanted to address, was this kind of last mile. And we've seen some really great best practices of this at different quantum hubs, but really tying that to supply and value chain capabilities. So we're regionally focused, and so we're looking at both founders here in Cascadia, US. So that's Washington State, Oregon, east through Montana, and even north through Canada, BC. But what are we good at? What is our region really strong in? Because even when you look at an addressable market, you can't, like, the whole thing is not your addressable market. You have to be specific, and you have to think about, especially for our time horizons, what
Yeah.
can you map our talent, capital, et cetera, to? We call it shipping and selling. When you're thinking about ship and sell, that's really different than thinking about like how you're going to get more grants, et cetera, for your R&D or for your research group.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that we saw somewhat missing across not just quantum and advanced compute, but we were seeing that across like what we broadly call deep tech. So there's things around like these considerations with biotech. There's things around this with climate, space. Yes, a lot of it is capital intensive, but when you're really trying to use your talent and capital and what you're good at, there's just so much within these value chain and supply chain links where you don't necessarily have to take on all of that capital to ship product and solutions that support and enable what others are already investing in. And we can
Okay.
talk more about like what that means like practically in terms of products, but that's something that we're seeing these like the national initiatives who are doing really well. That's something they think about a lot, because if you can't bring your ecosystem and suppliers and all of that with you, it kind of becomes this niche thing, like, oh yeah, those are the quantum people over there and those are the
Yeah.
AI people over there.
Yeah.
But when it's clear what contributes to those startups, companies, customers, et cetera, actually being able to use those products, and also knowing that you can actually supply what you need to keep those products running. Kind of like we're seeing some challenges right now around AI, the token model, and the data centers.
Mm-hmm.
So we're seeing that with AI. We're trying to work as smart as possible with that product and monetization upside for investors to hopefully avoid where we can some of that.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So obviously you're sitting inside a venture studio, and I kind of look across talent pipelines. So we're kind of both looking at that gap together. And I suppose the gap is open roles and qualified people in emerging tech. What's your kind of perspective on that?
Man, this is such an interesting one. We focus on product, right? We focus on ship and sell. And
Yeah.
so that sort of last mile and how all of that comes together, that takes all kinds, a little more than things upstream, which takes a lot more just pure play specialists.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing is, well, first, when you think about, and you can speak to this better than me, and I would love to kind of get your update on some of these numbers and availability. But when you think about just like quantum technology, or just kind of some of these like advanced compute intelligence, or just even deep tech, the kind of skills and proficiencies that you need to get things done. I mean, we even talk to investors in different investment groups who are like, hey, I want to update my investor thesis to go beyond software as a service or real estate or industrials or what have you, but they don't even know where to find the talent to do diligence on these tools. And it's such a relatively small pool of people who are qualified and capable and trustworthy to do that. And then not just that, but there's fierce competition for them because you have hyperscalers. I mean, IBM and IonQ and Quantinium and all these folks want to hire them.
All the companies that are listing this year, pretty much.
Yeah, right. So companies are, hire. So the companies are increasingly hiring, and they're hiring across roles. And if you have a startup, if you're working for a venture studio, you need a consultant, you need an advisor, you need to do like some of this work around diligence. You're competing with those same folks for the same pool of talent, and there are very limited hours
Yeah.
that they can allocate to whatever it is that you're doing. So that's where we're seeing disconnect. I say the other disconnect is, uh, I mentioned some of these different quantum hubs, national initiatives, and there's
Mm-hmm.
private-public partnership considerations, especially around workforce development. Um, and Amir, I'm formerly an IT recruiter. That's actually how I got started in IT, and I find it so fascinating the disconnect between like what talent acquisition and IT headhunters, like when you look at that premium, whenever there's a executive search or specialist search or headhunter in the mix, that margin speaks to how hard it is to fill that role, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet, like the workforce development plans, at least the ones that I've been privy to, there still seems to be a disconnect between recognizing that margin and how rare those skills and proficiencies are, and building like that education, apprenticeship, internship pipeline to directly map to that. And I would love to get your point of view on this, Amir, because you're somebody who along with others, instructs me in this area, especially being around it much longer, but also because
Yeah.
this is something I would love to see how we can even get on the same page. This does seem to be a challenge that kind of transcends
Yeah. Well,
of
interesting. I
this
mean,
category.
this is my yeah, my what's the word I'm looking for? My bee in
Your
my
bread and
bonnet, for
butter, they
want of a
say,
better way.
and the bee in your
Right.
bonnet. I was going to say your bread. We say in America bread and butter, but yeah, bee in the bonnet
Yeah,
works
be in
too.
my bonnet, bread and butter. But yeah, there's something that I'm working on quite a lot. One thing I find is when there are a lot of startups now coming through, and there's going to be a hell of a lot more. We talk about funding and Barclow and so on and so forth. What I see it missing is people are going into companies and going, okay, right, you've got a good product. Here's X amount to grow. But what they're not thinking about is the hiring strategy. Right, the pool of talent is so small, but they're going, okay, you've got 2.5 million, grow the team. I'm like, okay, but there's so many factors you need to factor into this. Okay, where are you located? Okay, who's your competition? What's your USP? Are you in the right location? So there's a lot of strategy that I think needs to be done and given to startups and founders from the off to go, okay, you need to start thinking about de-risking the funding, the churn of money, and so on, and start thinking about this strategically. Okay, right, we've got the money. Could start. Are we in the right place? Are the people that we need in this city? Do we need to relocate, and so on? So I've actually spent a lot of time doing workforce strategy with companies, saying, let's bring it
Mm-hmm.
back. All of a sudden you'll see you've got X amount of money. We need 5 people. It's not going to work that way. How does that sound to you?
That's very aligned with what we're seeing, and it honestly speaks to this. Gets into, if we can for a second, kind of nerd out on like what I'm really into models and monetization,
Yeah.
which, I'm in the right place for that. But this also factors into why a venture studio and having this flexibility around building and backing companies, and why this product focus. Because if I start with demand and product, well, the first thing is I solve for that, what I call like supply side thing, where you could be a solution looking for a problem. Because if you really are just starting from like, this is my patent, my solution, there's more than one way to peel a banana, as they say. If you
Yeah.
start with demand, you try different ways, right? You try to to meet that demand, and we call it specs over speculation, right? So when you're doing it that way, it's also great because now what does it take to make that product, what's your cost to serve, and therefore what talent, skills, and proficiencies are needed
Yeah.
at the product level, right?
Yeah.
So that actually helps us, like that kind of modeling really goes a long way, because that is what allows us as a studio to look at it from a perspective of a lot of people, the kind of, especially the old school sort of thinking around this was, well, for your top hires, especially if you want them to come on as a technical or business co-founder, and you're a scientist or an academic, etc., you need to like get them on with equity, right?
Yes.
But the thing is that, well, there's a number of challenges with that. But I had heard somebody, for example, a few weeks ago, I got to go to a family office summit, and at one of the panels, they made a really excellent point about how, pretty much short of kind of like what we're doing, where we're kind of building and backing things, and like you said, we're able to do that strategy from the very beginning for what kind of talent, partners, etc., to really keep a handle on our economics.
Hmm.
As the startup, if it does become a company, it's not getting diluted purely on talent equity,
Yeah.
right? Or something like that, because that's a trap folks are falling into, especially
Yeah.
if they're giving up equity to participate in incubators and accelerators and talent. So what this gentleman was saying from the stage was, when you think about the lead time and how quickly things are moving, unless you really are kind of doing these 0 to 1s, et cetera, it's very easy to miss it, because the talent that you're competing for is looking for something more established. You
Yeah.
might have something, like you said, that's really good, and by the time somebody calls you after the fact to write all of this, there's a saying that with every hyperscaler product release, 1,000 startups die, right?
Yeah.
So you're constantly on the clock. You're like, people are still trying to figure out all of this stuff, let alone like their moat. A lot of times they might be pre-product, and so it can get very messy really quickly. And we do see, unfortunately, a lot of really good stuff kind of die on the vine, because
Hmm.
these kind of early structural economics just aren't going to support them even getting something to get to market. And that has everything to do with how they need execution and product. And that's always going to come down to talent and initial investment.
You're preaching to the choir, and I love the fact that we're talking about this because that is my bread and butter, as you say. And I've been looking at the quantum market for the last 3 years, and this gap's just kept coming up and then coming up, coming up. People are going, you need to plan how to grow. What's your strategy for growth? Like, you need 5 people. Do you need 5 people right now necessarily? Or when do you know what's your marker? When do you need them? What's your capability? So on and so forth. And having that trajectory, and then also what's your USP? What's your, if you look at marketing, for example, you're going to bring somebody into a quantum company. What's their background going to be? How are they going to assimilate into that? There's so many factors that people just take for granted that I'm like, you need to start considering this if you want to grow. Like I've helped many AI companies grow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. I think to your point, this talent piece, I don't think is getting literally priced in early
yeah.
enough to make sure your economics aren't underwater. Like what we're talking about is if you can, that's kind of the value that like we look to add. And that's the other thing too. There's different, going back to models of monetization, when you look at
Yeah.
product and you work with folks like us, at least the way that we see it in our approach, because we're not like beholden to, it has to be like venture, it has to be like this. For us, it really needs to kind of meet the moment in the market in like this very
Mm-hmm.
practical, tactical way. So
Mm-hmm.
what that means is that maybe we do rev share.
Yeah.
So we're talking about
Yeah.
product, right? Like maybe we talk about rev share. People
Yeah.
are looking to we call it rev strapping, right? So do
Yeah.
you really need to raise this money in the first place? Couldn't you get a grant? Grants are a great gut check around, do you have the right talent, et cetera, on your team to even be eligible for non-dilutive funding? Do you have the right academic or national lab partnerships if you really want to get into
Mm-hmm.
like the pure quantum hardware stuff? So that's a really great gut check, because if you're struggling to be competitive in those sorts of pools because you don't have those right partners, et cetera, that can point you, and it doesn't cost nearly as much to fail and get feedback at failing a grant
Yeah. Yeah,
than it does like some
exactly.
of this other
Exactly.
stuff we're
Well,
talking
the
about,
pressure's
right?
not there, is it? There's not, somebody's not looking over
Right.
your shoulder going, okay, this is your markers, these are your deliverables, this is your runway, this is the cash burn, and you've got to be accountable. So it's, yes, I completely agree. I suppose from your vantage point in Barclow, you're now talking to early stage deep tech and quantum teams, yeah?
Yes.
What would you say if for your first 5 hires, for example, if you were to set up a company, maybe what would you obsess about getting right?
I would really focus on going back to what is going to be your first product. And what I mean that by that is, what is going to be the first thing you have on the truck where you actually have a path towards revenue? Because this time element, you have to plan in 4D, right? So it's
Hmm.
really this time element we see is killing people, even like when it comes to like talent and their hires. So you made a really great point earlier about, it's something I call like right size rigor. So where you're at, going back to like the roadmap and where you need to get to for these key milestones, that talent mix actually changes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it should change, right?
Yeah.
So like the same people that you have, going back to like the grant sort of thing, right? The folks that you have who got you that grant to move your TRL, your total readiness level, from like 3 to 5, those that aren't going to be the people on your sales force necessarily. Those aren't going
Yeah.
to be the people who are like trying to like get you in front of folks for meetings, or
Yeah.
they're probably not going to be people who help with your pricing model.
Yeah.
They're not going to be the ones who work like with some like your tech stack stuff of how you're going to keep all of that. So I say that to say, what I would advise teams in that phase is to really look at your roadmap and do it very realistically. One of the things I hear folks say, like in deep tech, because it is capital intensive, et cetera, is that it's impossible to build a model or understand your cost to serve pre-product. I disagree. That's, no model is perfect, but some are
Hmm.
useful. I kind of equate that if somebody was like, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get a mortgage on this house, so I shouldn't bother knowing what the electric bills are going to be if I have a hot tub and a home theater. It's like, no, you should know that. You should
You should know
you
that.
should go out there and benchmark
Yeah. What are your
benchmark that,
taxes
because
and so on? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like because like that kind of operational cost to serve, there are definitely
Yeah.
ways to model that. There are ways to model that with risk and contingency funds. You don't want that runway to get eaten up so quickly that it's
Yeah.
like a fundamental mismatch between what your TRL always needed. I've even seen folks get burned on some of this stuff with like burn rate and hire that they probably could have outsourced. They probably could have done it contract to hire, And that would have been good, right? Because they could have had an incentive. They could have said, hey, I'll have you here in this role. Like we're moving from the research to roadmap
Hmm.
phase, right? So I'm
Yeah.
switching more into engineering cycles and I'm looking for folks, but you're going to be on a 6-month contract to hire and they need to come with introductions. They
Yeah.
need to come
Yeah.
with like sales conversion. Like you can actually set up kind of a mini scorecard
Yeah.
to like be like the toll that you pay to even see like if the relationship's going to work. We're not the kind of venture studio that kind of like throws teams together to like be like, hey, you guys go work on this.
Yeah.
We try to be a lot more mindful about. Right now we're focused on early stage companies, but even for our 0 to 1s, we wouldn't use that approach for the very reason that we're talking about, because like that talent mix needs to like flex in and out, and therefore how you incentivize folks. What we're finding is that people are way more amenable to like actually getting paid with like
Yeah.
some rev share, with some incentive, with some commission that they're positioned to convert on and put money in their pocket, than for you to over dilute on equity for their talent.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
Not only is
the
that not
equity is a long
attract,
game
it's
as
not
well, isn't it?
attractive.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
equity is a long
it
game,
really.
and I worked in data science, machine learning, AI in the biotech field for quite a number of years, and there
Mm-hmm.
was a lot of equity. Oh yeah, you've got equity, etc. But that needs to vest. That product needs to go to market, needs to be FDA approved. Then it needs to sell. Then you get your equity, which could be 6, 10 years in the future, and then you've got and so getting paid first, I think, is a very important perspective rather than going for the equity. So a lot of times these companies folded, and the equity is worth nothing.
Well, yeah, and you know, there's. I will also say too, especially right now in deep tech, the savvier sort of investors, they're asking very good questions about this that might be a little different than people are used to hearing about in startup land, at least in America, about team composition.
Hmm.
So, while for sure people are looking to make sure you have, you know, PhDs, the right kind of oversight, make sure you don't have vaporware, you have people actually like doing what you're actually doing and kick your tires. There's also be something that said, you know, people ask the question like, you know, have you received any non-dilutive funding? You know, because it's like, well, what use of the funding that's out there that, you know, that's so
Yeah,
prioritized across these programs or areas, were you able to be competitive for that? Which is a fair question, right? Because, you know, you're asking for other people's money. Have you been able to be competitive with these programs? Another thing
yeah,
that we were talking about just now is, could you, a founder and a team that can show they can build this way, where they can really build to their milestones and actually be able to put money in people's pocket, that is very attractive to investors,
yeah, yeah,
because it shows that you're actually thinking about the economics and the aligned incentives of your team, and you have a recognition that your roadmap is going to evolve and you're going to pivot, and you're going to keep some of that powder dry to not just keep the lights on, but to keep moving forward that way.
yeah, yeah.
That really can make you stand out, just even showing that you're working with folks helping you allocate capital and become operational that way.
Yeah. Interestingly, you remind me of a point that I made a couple of years ago, and people were kind of looking at me, and I think it's the IT recruiter background in both you and I. And I was looking at the quantum market, and I was saying, look, you need to start looking at what we call interim or contractors, who can come in, slot into your business for a period of time, get you to your next marker, then maybe walk away. And that's where the revenue share comes in. Say, okay, you do this project, et cetera, et cetera. There's going to be a big need for fractional people in the quantum space coming up. And that's, I think, something that startups should start considering and putting a pot away for as well. Might cost you more, but the expertise that it will bring will get you to the next stage of your roadmap, which then gets you the investment and so on and so forth.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I going back to the blockchain startup I was a part of that I mentioned, you know, their new programming language, their success is determined by how many developers are using their solution and building on their chain, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, the Series B and all that, but what was really savvy about them and a few other like sort of like newer blockchains, they were basically doing that. They were creating like for less than a year, like FTE US, you can create bug bounties, and that's how they were getting like product quality feedback, you know, instead of hiring, you know, whoever, whatever. And they were able to crowdsource it. They were able to give much more. They were able to do like a challenge prize model. They were
Okay.
able to, yeah, issue grants. Like, and when they would say like something like a grant, what it would be is they would have some programs had like a developer in residence.
Yeah.
So what they would do is like they would set aside money for like a period of time for people to work on this subset of problems, and that gets to go into their GitHub repo, it gets to go into their portfolio. You could hire them in, like you would give yourself options. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of really creative and scrappy ways that you can actually scale up the product input, feedback, and execution cycles you're getting tapping it. I went to, so I did that MIT quantum hackathon.
Oh yeah,
um, I stay in touch with all of those really brilliant folks who are up all night, like, taking the NVIDIA challenge, taking the IonQ challenge. Why? Those folks would be happy to talk to you about, you want them to review a paper, you want them to get into GitHub,
yeah,
etc., and at a
yeah.
very reasonable price, because they're trying to build their portfolio and experience too.
Exactly. I've never heard that phrase, bug bonus, because obviously that's blockchain oriented. So basically, they're paying you to discover a bug in the programming, and if you do, you get a bonus. Is that, have I read that right?
Yeah. So yeah, it's a bug.
That's
Yeah, bug
crazy. That's
bounties is what
brilliant.
they call. Yeah. So
Yeah,
like it's similar to some of the stuff with like red teams or blue teams or capture the flag.
yeah,
Like if you find a critical bug or a critical issue, there'll be a prize out there, and usually the prize is proportional to how confident the platform is that you're not going to find anything, but also to compensate you properly if you do. But yeah, like,
yeah,
you're not too early to use if you have a platform and a product and all that, and you're trying to move stuff to be more enterprise production, whatever. There's nothing wrong with a pilot test group, private preview, bug
I love
bounty.
that.
Like, this is the kind of stuff people do for products that I think can be really disconnected from what we were talking about a bit earlier.
Yeah, and that reminds me of Meta or Facebook as it was, and that obviously I don't know ins and outs, but when you're looking at the film, they were creating these rooms where people would come in, and the people who can find a program properly, etc., would potentially get a job. So it's really interesting. Yeah, it's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, and some folks are like even looking at doing, the X Prize, and there's even some of the
Hmm.
quantum challenges out there, and people have sent
Yeah.
them to me and all of that. I'm meeting some of these more hands-on folks, and what I'm noticing is that they do these quantum hackathons, they do different bug bounties. There've been like these encryption hack challenges for Bitcoin to see if
Hmm.
you how much you can disrupt Bitcoin and its crypto resilience on chain. And so, but it's such a great way to find talent. People find teams. I know some folks who have come out of these different hackathons. It's inspired a paper that they've submitted and spoken at a conference with it. But I truly believe that, first that people have been encouraging me to say more and louder. If you really want to follow this space and like talent proficiency, just even like this, like these execution cycles and like what it's going to actually take to build on top of, what IBM is doing, what IonQ is doing, et cetera, or
Hmm.
even just like what's happening with sensor data, all of that stuff. You definitely need what we say, like, you need more GitHub repos and fewer Gartner reports. Because
Yeah.
Gartner is
Yeah.
great for analysis and all of that. But if you want to know what it takes and how much it costs and how long it takes and what works and what doesn't work, we have to get out of the there's not enough qubits, it's not fault tolerant, and more into the use this product. I wanted it to
Yeah.
do this. It didn't do this for me. Here's
Yeah.
how it can improve,
Yeah.
because that's where all the action is going to live. And we are very quickly moving away from AI versus AI with resumes and
Yeah.
job
Yeah.
submissions and CVs and into, let me see your GitHub repo, let me see your
And
portfolio,
this is
let me
how
see your
data
body of
science
work.
kicked off when I started in 2016, and it was classified as the sexiest job of the 21st century. And it was all about your GitHub profile. What have you done? Show us what you can do. Yeah, quantum needs to come into that. So leads me to my next question. If you could redesign the workforce and talent policy from the vantage of Barclow, what would you do? What would you tell policymakers to understand?
Mom, I have 3 kids, so and my oldest is 16, so
Yeah,
this is something I think about in general.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I am one of those millennials who graduated in '08 and '09, where you could, be at the top of your class, all of that, and you still couldn't quite, escape all of the disruption and everything. And I think that, especially working on what I'm working on with Barclow, seeing these other great examples of private public partnership, but also being a mom who knew what that was like for me. And just,
Hmm.
it's just been pivot after pivot. And then thinking about the situation my kids are going to be graduating into, I think that we would really, I really want to think about that sort of education pipeline of, because the thing is that, going back to what I had said earlier about your starting place,
Yeah.
that means a lot. And the reality is that from a K through 12 perspective in the US, we have already expended a lot of capital, right? By the time a kid is in high school and we're talking to them about their career.
Just the point I was about to make. Yeah, yeah, and the longevity of the educational cycle.
Yeah. So I think that is where I would look. I would say that it's something that if folks are really serious about it, um, there needs to be this kind of near term, midterm, and long term strategy for how we are in the near term going to. I'm really big into cross skilling.
Hmm.
So I used to do learning and development, and I worked in HR across like some supply chain things, but I was an IT recruiter, and particularly let's like just bring it to quantum, for example. On the defense side with security and crypto agility, et cetera, you're going to be much better served taking someone who already does threat management, who already
Mhm.
works in a security operations center, who already does like GRC and risk sort of things and compliance, and they know how to follow NIST frameworks and know how to crosswalk it to ITIL. You're much better off taking those folks and cross skilling them into
Yeah.
understanding RSA
Yeah.
and threats and disruptions and how to detect them than you are taking somebody from zero cybersecurity, zero security, zero risk
Yeah.
to understanding what it takes to have that resilience. So that's, I think that's something we don't talk about nearly enough is kind of these like adjacent, I know you and I, especially we talk to candidates about transferable skills, right?
All the time. Upskilling, cross-skilling, expanding your portfolio, etc.
Right. And so that kind of crosswalk matchmaking needs to be mirrored, in my opinion, on the policy and academic side as well. And there needs to be these pathways. So the near term one would be around some of this, like how can we cross skill and upskill tied to an apprenticeship?
Hmm.
So if you do have a quantum hub, if you're one of those blessed people out there and you have a quantum hub and you're doing this programming, and you're already working with academia, you're working on with their labs and you're getting grants, et cetera, where are you looking across their universities and their strengths to plug people in, right?
Yeah.
I'm saying that like across the board. So like if there are some things around security and quantum resilience, and you are going to do some cryptographic inventories. Who are you bringing along from the cybersecurity, networking, tech management, et cetera, program at the university to do those exercises in your
Hmm.
hub? Who are like so I think about that sort of approach of all right, we already have a lot going on K through 12, we already have a lot going on in colleges and universities. Where are those pathways directly into getting a bit more hands-on? And if people don't have the proficiency, or it's sensitive, their security clearances, what are we doing within those sorts of learning pathways? Where my concern is that some of this stuff, and was the case when I was going through the system too, some of the things that have been most essential for my career and me being competitive and being able to just function in work life and leadership and
Hmm.
all that, they were all considered electives.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yet they were all considered like a special interest thing. So like
Yeah.
it wasn't like the core. And even in the US with STEM, I mean, I've traveled abroad, you talk to other folks, and it's like what we call science, technology, engineering, and math. Other folks are like, what is that? Like, you guys had to create an acronym for what we've had baked in since like fourth grade,
Yeah.
like, but
Yeah.
we did
Yeah.
this thing where we made it, at least when I was growing up, it was like a special after school program, or only gifted kids got to do it. And now we're 20 years into that approach. And there's these other countries where the way that we treat English, where it's like, hey, you're writing essays and you're reading Shakespeare, whether you become an author or not. Other places have had that approach when it comes to math and engineering and science. Like, oh no,
Yeah.
you're going to learn this stuff whether you become an engineer or not.
Yeah.
And I think 20 years into this, we're kind of starting to see the results of that. And so for folks like us, that makes us have to get really savvy about not just talent today, but talent tomorrow. That's why we work with a lot of students and youth and all
Yeah.
of that. It's because the time horizon for those like researchers, and I talked to one just last week at Northwestern University, and she's like, I like talking to people. I like the lab. I love what I'm doing. She goes, but I want to talk to people about what I'm doing in the lab, and I want to
Yeah.
talk to them about their lab, and I want to talk
Yeah.
about how's it making a difference and how can we help each other. She goes, and now I'm wondering, like, if I don't want to be an academic, if I don't want to be a professor, and I don't want to have to keep always fighting for funding for our lab all the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
where can I go? And that's what I mean about these pathways. We have such brilliant people working on brilliant things, and they want other opportunities besides to stay in academia or kind of try their hand, at the gauntlet of startups or big tech. I think there's more we could be doing collectively for those options and that readiness.
Yeah, a little plug for myself. That's why I call this podcast Quantum Pathways. And the whole philosophy was to get people on board, such as yourself, to start talking about quantum, which is a very tech-heavy subject, and and it's way over my head, to be honest with you. But it's saying,
Same.
okay, look, this is a subject, but it's not that. There are entry points into it, and let's look at how we can get you into these careers and these companies and so on. So by talking to people like yourself and various other people, so people can listen and go, oh, actually, there could be an avenue for me. I could get out of a lab and get into this because this person has said so and they've done it and so on. So that's been the motivation behind me setting this up a year ago.
That's excellent. And, we Thank you. And we definitely need more of that. I'm a firm believer. I used to do anti-human trafficking and exploitation work, which was way more intense than what I've been working on here lately. And I just did that personally as a mission. But the different nonprofits and groups and the things I would organize as part of it, one of our mantras was each one reach one. You don't have to be the person who kicks in the door and like saves the day,
Yeah,
but you don't necessarily like have to be the person who is like out there and trying to raise money, etc. There is a place for you, and it's going to take all kinds. It's
yeah,
gonna take everybody, and so that's a principle I learned in a much tougher environment. But what I find in this industry is folks like yourself, when Barclow was first getting started and others, um, so approachable.
yeah,
That's the thing. It's
yeah.
like this podcast can be approachable. The folks who are in the industry right now are really helpful and approachable. One of our mantras at Barclow is names and faces over hype and headlines, which is why I've been traveling. I'm going to keep traveling to
Hmm.
go meet the people. I hear about what's going on in Chicago Hub. I want to meet those folks. I hear what's
Yeah,
going on with Japan. I want to go meet those folks.
yeah,
Where I grew up in Colorado, I want to get out there and see those folks as well. So we need more of this. I
yeah.
can I share something, Amir, too, on some of this bit around talent and pathways and us not quite being prepared for what exactly we've democratized with technology.
Oh, you 100% you can. But we're probably going to be here for another hour. I'm happy to keep talking, but yes, please do.
I want to know. I definitely want to wrap this up soon, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention this because this is something that I've been bringing up to folks lately, and I want to get your response to it from like a
Sure.
talent, et cetera, perspective. But going back to like there's part of the innovation paradox is that we work and talk to a lot of different VCs and funding groups, et cetera, across deep tech, but also, still big focus on AI, and hedging and diversifying
Hmm.
and operationalizing existing bets on AI. And there's a very interesting paradox of I am invested in AI and I really believe in advanced intelligence and I believe it needs to be responsible and ethical, but I know it can make a big difference across all these sectors. Awesome. But then when people actually use it to do those things,
Yeah.
uh, and it starts, it's like, oh, well, wait a second. Did I kind of invest in the thing that's kind of like disrupting my own model? And it is kind of disrupting my own approach to things. And I think that this is very important for us to think about for talent because particularly in quantum tech, and deep tech, and I'll pick on AI because there's two examples of this
Yeah.
recently, I think illustrate this point. There are people out there who are going to be scrappy and they have beginner's mind and we have democratized tools. And yes, they have their bugs and hallucinations, but people are going to like keep figuring things out with technology, regardless of what the experts and the TRL says. And
Yep.
we need way more of those people. And we
Oh,
need
yeah.
to be making sure those people are on the right side of this thing. So my concern on the security side is that if the breakers believe in these tools more than the builders, we're already in trouble, right? So
We're
if
doomed. Yeah.
people, yeah, we're in trouble, right? Because if there's a group of folks that are like the qubits, and the fault tolerance and the scale, and Google just announced that. I heard somebody say, "Oh, Google announced that it was a press release thing. It's not really and all that." But then you have a subset of people like, I think we should try to get into these Bitcoin wallets, right? And they're going to use everything,
Oh God. There's someone
and
sitting
they
out
do.
some. There's someone sitting in a bedroom in some country doing something that we haven't even thought of. This is disruptor mindset, and it's not necessarily disruptor. That's a horrible way to necessarily put it. But there's somebody who's looking at something with a viewpoint that we haven't even comprehended, and they're going to become using these tools that we haven't even thought you could use these tools for. And there's going to be millions of them, and it's crazy. But then,
Yeah,
as you say,
and
if
not
they're
just
using
yeah.
it for nefarious reasons or so on, that's a scary place to be.
Right. And not just that, these folks are developing agents to set up the things for them to try.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
running like all the time. It's really something. And so, just two quick examples around this, and a bit of a heavier example. A couple weeks ago in the New York Times, there was a somewhat long read about these unfortunate and increasing sort of overdose deaths from designer synthetic drugs across the US.
hmm,
And when the toxicology screenings come back from these really tragic situations, there's an assumption that it was fentanyl. And it's not. So folks couldn't be helped with Narcan, et cetera. And when they have to escalate the toxicology reports, the chemists that are in this article and this reporting does a great job of showing is that the research from abandoned pharmaceutical, biotech, et cetera, papers were public and folks used AI to generate drugs
Yeah.
from their failed research,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
and so these folks are turning out these synthetic drugs faster than any pharmaceutical sort of product life cycle, of course, but more than
Yeah.
that, faster than any pharmaceutical testing
Yeah.
mechanism
Yeah.
can even keep up with.
Yeah.
And so this is the kind of thing where people are like, well, if you're thinking AI is just ChatGPT and it's hallucinating and you're frustrated with Copilot, this is a good reminder that all AI is not created equal.
Yeah.
So don't forget that. If you were to talk to folks in venture, all these other thing of like, what would it take to set that up? Will it take millions of dollars? And then your investors would want this and this and this. And these other guys are like, I don't think so. I think we could do this. And they're doing it for these nefarious purposes. And
Yeah.
now they're getting faster drug breakthroughs
Yeah.
than the folks who were really looking to AI to actually to solve precision
Yeah.
medicine. And
Yeah.
that's the upside down thing. Like, let's not do that. Happier
Yeah.
example, a guy in Australia, his dog had cancer. He had some money and went and got his dog's genome sequenced and then got an mRNA treatment for his dog. His dog still has cancer, but their prognosis is much better. The dog is still alive.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
Same thing. If you were to try to put a company, a fundraise, a private public partnership around what that one guy did for his dog in the matter of like 2 months.
Timescales.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? So we're going to start seeing more talent that needs to find their way to us who are thinking like that. And that's something I want to put the word out there for is like, if you are scrappy, if you are a layperson, if you are one of those like the beginner is going to try more things that because the expert says it's impossible, that's kind of the direction where we're really looking to go, because we really think that that's not just going to be essential to give people opportunity on the right side of this stuff, but because, like you said, those are the folks who are going to look into the microscope of quantum technology and not just build for the microscope and error correction, all that. They're going to look into these, like what they can now see with these tools,
Yeah.
and just start making things.
Yeah, and interestingly, if you think about the generations, they've grown up in tech. You know, they've grown up with iPads, they've grown up with computers, just surrounded by technology, whereas we've had to adopt it. You know, they were born into it, so they're going to have a different perspective on capability and vision and all of that. That's how I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, it's inspiring because, and even when I spoke with you, one of the things that was so refreshing when we were first getting started was, it's understandable, that folks, they understand like the limits of quantum technology, but there was a period of time where a lot of the folks that might have been a bit more vocal or out there on quantum, they definitely want to be responsible. They really kind of focus on correcting hype, but in doing so, people don't know what is there now. So, you can very easily listen to, and I'm sure you've been in some of those conversations or attended those sorts of sessions. And it's all about what quantum technology can't do yet, how many years it's going to take, how expensive it is, et cetera. And that is so different from kind of like what we're talking about now, where people are going out there and discovering these things without these labels. But what people are able to do with some of these NVIDIA tools, what people are able to do with Qiskit, going back to the GitHub repos, right? I think we're still stuck in just naming quantum companies, that Gartner report thing.
Yeah.
We don't even name products. Like a lot of folks don't know the IBM line of computers. They're named after birds.
Yeah.
There's a heron. There's a nighthawk, the next generation, and they use superconductivity. But I'm finding that we're doing ourselves maybe a bit of a disservice in the industry when we're still talking about what's not there and what's hype, instead of being like, hey, here is a product, here is a tool, this is what it's used for, here's who uses it, here's like its pros, its cons. And I think the more we can start talking about things in feature and functionality, people's
100%.
cross-skilling and upskilling will be much more legible to them. Yeah. And I hopefully that will kind of demystify things, because we do have products out there, guys. If you're interested and you're hearing this, hit me up. I'm happy to point you in the direction of some things to tinker with.
Well, this sounds like it should be a session in itself for June, for Seattle Deep Tech Week.
Oh, yes. We have some announcements coming soon. I'm actually going to some meetings today. We have some really great corporate partnerships and others where, once again, it's going to be this shift to like this hands-on workshop. So Seattle Deep Tech Week is going to be the week of June 8th. We're very excited because Deep Tech Week has, for the last couple of years, been in San Francisco and New York, but they're expanding to different cities. Another shameless plug, Amir and my friends across the pond, you guys absolutely should have one in London.
Well, we talked about that on email very briefly, so we will talk about that maybe offline, but for sure. But
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah. So how's it
The
going
team has
for
been great to work
Seattle?
with.
So who's are you quite fundamental behind the Seattle Deep Tech Week? How's it all
Yes
being
and no.
set up?
So yeah, so that's a great question, and that's what we love about it. So I'm also like a TEDx ambassador, and TEDx with their brand, their structure, there's a lot of governance. Shout out to Liz, our event chair. There's so much that happens there. Deep Tech Week is different in that it has like these really great tools and resources. Like their site has a venue matchmaker, it has a schedule builder, all of that, but it's ultimately decentralized. The goal is to keep it as low cost and accessible for people as possible. So I kind of get the best of both worlds here, where we knew that we wanted to participate,
Hmm.
bringing folks from San Francisco, New York to see what Seattle has that is kind of being classed as deep tech, and it's just
Yeah.
it's what's beyond SaaS, right? Barclow jumped at the opportunity along with Actuate Ventures and a few others, and so what we've basically been doing is just sharing our insights, planning resources with those who are interested in the community, because we definitely want it to be a success, but also because this is a bit of a long game for us. We really see value in first of all, deep tech is considered, more boots than suits, right?
Hmm.
This is the stuff that touches manufacturing, robotics, like built world, like that kind of stuff, but also encompasses biotech, climate solutions, etc. We foresee, well, a lot of the data points to, if the first 25 years was about the digital world, so
Yeah.
humans with technology and connectivity, we're right back to the next 25 years. How do we use that technology to improve our lives
Hmm.
in the physical world, right? And now we're back to infrastructure and all of that. So we're really excited because this allows us to connect with experts, speakers, like-minded leadership across the deep tech network, bring them here. But this also means that we'll be able to have more warm leads and relationships when we check out the other deep tech sort of hubs, because they're expanding globally. So
Hmm.
that's the beginning of June. And then for folks who aren't going to be here in Seattle for that, we're going to be at Quantum Tech World in
You are, aren't
Boston.
you, in Boston?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're excited for that. So I have the privilege to be on the Global Startup Advisory Board. We have a couple of startups, some prospects we're looking to work with longer term that we're bringing with us, one exhibiting and one who's part of the startup competition. And then we're also putting together a bit of like a VIP side event to keep talking about this whole thing around skills for quantum readiness, and also, where can services, like we were talking about earlier, not just for startups, but for government
Hmm.
programs, et cetera, where
Hmm.
can services be a stopgap for some of these
Yeah.
missing skills? How do we cultivate more university talent, that sort of thing into these other pathways? But yeah, we're really excited. That's June 20th.
Amazing. I tell you what, I had a whole list of questions that I was going to ask you, and it's all formatted and so on and so forth. But we've gone off piece completely. But I have to say, I have really, really enjoyed that. Just it's so refreshing that someone's coming in from it from a how do I phrase this? But from a breaking kind of perspective, rather than the, like you say, what it can't do yet, and it's this far ahead, and it's 4 years in advance, 5 years in advance. No, the technology that we have right now, people can use, and I love that you're looking at it that way and saying people start looking at it now because the technology is there. It's not where don't wait 5 years, and let's start getting these disruptors and these people with a vision to come into this ecosystem and come into Barclow Ventures, etc. It's kind of blown my mind. I love it.
Oh, thank you. No, that's we really appreciate opportunity where we can kind of share. We know it's a different approach, but we know that also times are really different. It's one of those things where we got to work with what's on the truck, and we're like, even as we're trying to get more things on the truck. And you know what? If you don't want to, get into some of this hardware stuff and all that, trucks still need things, right? Like there's so many sort of like adjacencies around what we need to ship and sell and
Yeah,
productize
yeah.
these solutions. That there's that's if you get nothing else out of this episode, I hope your audience gets that, Amir, is that there are more and more places to plug in here.
Well,
And
this is why I say
don't
quantum
be
and quantum
discouraged or
adjacent.
intimidated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
quantum and quantum adjacent. For a company to function and grow, there's so many roles within that don't necessarily need the quantum knowledge, but need the ambition, the understanding, and so on. And that's what makes it quite an exciting space. Because friends of mine go, "Oh, you're looking for physicists, etc." I'm like, "No, no, that's part of it." But you need your marketing, you need your product, you need your delivery, you need your sales. You need a village, effectively.
Yeah, yeah, that's why we're a big believer in ecosystem. I mean, we do a lot of events, but like that's kind of part of our strategy around like how do we evolve things from events into ecosystems? How do
Hmm.
we always have a call to action, an entry point, something for someone to say yes to in a
Yeah.
way that like matches where they're ready to explore in this area?
Amazing. How can people reach out and find you?
Yeah, so I'm primarily on LinkedIn. We are going to be doing some updates to our website and some of our outreach here shortly, all just based off of the incredible things we've learned and the things we've been able to partner with, some announcements coming out leading up to Deep Tech Week, et cetera. So stay tuned to LinkedIn for all of that. And yeah, like you mentioned, there's Seattle Deep Tech Week. Check out the broader Deep Tech Week site. Reach out to the team or to me if you're like, hey, my city should use one of those, could use one of those. The team is great about getting you set up. Yeah, we got Quantum Tech World coming up, and then yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I'm a pretty approachable person, so if you do have any questions or want to learn more about what we're doing, or if you're one of the hubs out there and I have not stopped like in your neck of the woods yet, I'm still actively doing field trips and tours, and our community here not only loves to hear about that, but we love connecting our talent. We love connecting interested people into the work that you're doing as well. We see all of this as very complementary.
Yeah.
And we're not really into duplicating efforts. So we love to build with and build along.
Fantastic. Sierra, we've been speaking for over an hour and that's flown by, and I could continue for another hour, but I know you've got meetings on for the rest of the day. So I'd just like to say, look, thank you so much for the time. Been fascinating. You've made me think about so many different things in a really, really positive way. Things that I've missed. And I think the background from IT recruiter to this, that, the other, there's just certain synergies. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Amir. It's so great catching up with you again. And yes, we'll have to make sure we catch up offline, because obviously, as we discussed today, there's a whole lot of work to do, but we could have a whole lot of fun doing it and bring our friends along.
And that's the key, isn't it? Excellent. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's it for this episode of Beyond the Bit Quantum Pathways. If you found it useful, follow and subscribe wherever you listen, and share it with someone working in quantum or emerging tech. And if your organisation is hiring in quantum, you can find us at QAI Talent. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.